Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and today you might remember her if you were watching my TV show last year. We have Dr. Gay Hilton, who is a naturopathic doctor from Integrative Wellness Options in Erie, Pennsylvania. Thank you for coming on again.
Oh, I was looking forward to it and always enjoyed being with the group here.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, isn't it? Okay. Now, you're here to talk about a topic called lifetime sports. And tell our viewing audience what you mean by lifetime sports.
Well, first of all, my background was originally in health and physical education. So when I was a health and physical education major, we took courses in lifetime sports. And we think in terms of team sports like basketball and volleyball and that type of activity that the kids learn in gym class. But lifetime sports are tennis, golf, sports that you actually learn maybe in your phys ed class, especially in this day and age. There's much more emphasis on lifetime sports because these are sports that we can do our entire life. So swimming, golf and tennis, hiking, there are ways in which you learn how to hike properly and use a walking stick, a trail stick or whatever. And as these lifetime sports are integrated into your everyday life, we can do them starting at a young age and continue doing them our entire life. So that's why they're called lifetime sports. Swimming. I used to swim in the Masters swim team in the Erie, Crawford County area. And I remember we had women in their 80s and even 90s that were competing in their own age group. So the beauty of that is if you start a lifetime sports as a young person and continue, for example, I started golfing at 10. I am still golfing now, and I'm not going to reveal my age, but many years. And so it is a wonderful thing to be able to keep doing. Now, there is obviously, as you age, your joints and your mobility may not be as good, and you may not be as good at the lifetime sport that you're doing, and that's when you might want to go into something like swimming. You need to keep active your whole life, whether it be hiking, walking, jogging becomes difficult, and that's another lifetime exercise, fitness model. But again, as we age, we start having difficulties sometimes with hips and knees and shoulders, which get replaced, and then they try to go back doing the same thing. I have an 82-year-old cousin that has played tennis most of her life, and she's just now starting to say, well, I think I'm going to back off on the tennis because it's hard on the knees and the hips and the shoulders. So when that happens, then we have to find another lifetime sport to keep active with, and of course swimming is one. Tai Chi, Qigong, any of those type of activities that are very moderate as far as movement, but very energetic.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to mention a couple of stories that I know of elderly people. And one of them was a 100-year-old woman that was still able to do advanced yoga poses. I saw her sitting in the full lotus posture. That's with both feet on the opposite knees, And another story was one that was, I think, just a few years ago. They interviewed on the news a man who was 100 years old at the time they were interviewing him, and he was still playing golf on a regular basis and felt that he still had at least a few more years that he was going to be able to play golf. So it probably really does help with your longevity if you do participate in some form of exercise throughout your life.
Well, and here's an interesting that you would mention that. In golf, you can take a cart. So as you age, and you can't walk the 9 holes, you can take a cart, but that's incredible for a 100-year-old person, because typically by the time you're 100, your joints are pretty well, minimally flexible, and you're stiff, and the circulation isn't as good. So that's a truly incredible thing. So that's somebody obviously that ate well, and did foods that would lubricate his joints, a lot of coconut oil and that type of thing. I mean, if you go into the areas like the Philippines where people have coconut oil as a regular part of their daily diet, that lubricates the joints. And there are a lot of those men that are in their way up in their 90s that do physical labor still. But that's an amazing story.
Well, I have another story. It just popped into my head. Another one that I just now remembered. There was maybe about 15 years ago, I think, something like that. There was one woman that was 104 years old when they were interviewing her, and she was still doing her own house cleaning and driving the car to run her own errands and doing her own cooking, and she was bowling on a league every week at the age of 104. And was getting really good bowling scores still.
Oh my gosh. And again, bowling is a lifetime sport. So we're seeing, but again, you're lifting a ball, you're doing some movement that you're having to bend your knees and extend your arm out. So that's an incredible feat, I'll tell you. And of course, there are people all over the world that are still doing some activities that at their age you're just surprised at. I have a curious story. I had an uncle that, my aunt and uncle lived in Cleveland, Ohio, and when they moved into their home in 1949, it had a tennis court in the backyard. It was an old tennis court. And they used that tennis court every day for one thing or the other, whether it was tennis or whether in the winter they would ice it up and we could go there and ice skate. So when we would go over there, we'd always take our skates because we could ice skate. They flooded part of it and then froze it, and he had a plastic tarp down. And it was a wonderful thing. And then in the summer when I was there, we would play tennis. So my uncle was playing tennis from the time he was a fairly young man and still playing at 88. And so when I would visit them in Florida, they would go down for so many months of the year. I was playing regular tennis in a tennis league at the time, and I thought, oh, I don't know, this is going to be kind of hokey to play in his tennis league with him, because even though they play every day, they're all in their 70s, 80s. The youngest would have been in their 60s. Well, when I was in my 40s at the time, and when I went and joined in with them, I could not believe the level of play. They were just sharpshooters. And I found myself, who I had been playing for years and competitively in doubles and playing in tournaments and playing singles, I could not believe how articulatingly accurate their shots were. And they were running just as much as I could, as was my uncle. So he was still playing tennis at 88. So it can be done, but it's got to be a situation where when you're doing a lifetime sport, you're continually operating in that mode as long as you can. And obviously you're eating right, you're getting good oils into your body, olive oil, coconut oil, that are the two oils they recommend to lubricate the joints. And actually, I've heard of people rubbing coconut oil into their joints, and I recommend that. Like rubbing coconut oil onto your knees, the coconut oil goes right into the joint, and it helps lubricates it. So that's going to give you longevity with your cartilage and the movement of your knees.
Right. I have heard, is it synovial fluid that I've heard about?
Yes.
That you need to keep exercising the joints so that they don't have aches and pains.
Exactly. And lubricating the body either through the oils, like I would say the coconut oil, and hydrating. This is a biggie. People, as they get older, tend to get drier. And the kidneys are what in the body regulate the fluid levels. So when older people start on diuretics, which are not good in my opinion, because it throws off minerals. So as it's throwing off the excess water, it's also throwing off your minerals, and it begins to create dehydration issues. Now you got a whole nother problem. So natural diuretics are definitely the way to go, as opposed to being on a drug that pushes all this fluid out, and along with it your minerals that have to remain in balance.
Yeah,
so hydrating is so important for the joints.
There's this one woman that I know. She was in her 40s when I first met her. We're friends. And she, even way back then, she was taking a diuretic that somebody had prescribed for her, and she wishes she'd never gotten started on them, because it sounds like her body has developed a dependence on them. And she says if she tries cutting back or going off of them or anything, she just starts to get puffed up, you know, with fluid retention. And she says it makes her really mad. She has to have take potassium supplements all the time too. And
the other issue is when you're on a diuretic, you're eventually going to become immune to that diuretic.
Oh, are you really?
And then you have to get on another diuretic. So therein lies the problem. In addition to that, the natural diuretics will get the fluid out just as effectively. And believe it or not, one of the natural diuretics is asparagus juice. And you can actually take canned asparagus. And
it doesn't even have to be fresh and raw?
No. You can take a canned asparagus and run it through the blender and drink that, and that will help eliminate fluids. And there are various kidney formulas. As a naturopathic doctor, I get people on formulas to rebuild kidney function, and as we do that, we also are able to, eventually get the fluid levels down. But the scary part about the mineralization issues is when they test your sodium, magnesium, and potassium levels, they'll go by if you're low normal. And that's not healthy, because if you're low normal in magnesium or low normal in sodium, you're actually zero at the tissue level.
Oh my gosh.
And that's where you need to have the balance of the minerals. So I always caution people that are on diuretics, the minute you start to see you're dipping into low normal, you really need to hydrate.
Well, yeah, you know, some of those medical tests really don't tell you a lot. It's my understanding that with low thyroid hormone, it doesn't show up on a blood test until it's only producing 50% of the normal, less than 50% of what is really normal.
And the best way to deal with that, actually, they claim, and I've read this over and over, is if you have a mercury thermometer, and you put it under your armpit 10 minutes before you get out of bed. Shake it down the night before so it's down below 97 or 98.6, well down below that. And then put it under your armpit in the morning before you get out of the bed. Keep it under the armpit for 10 minutes. If your temperature is below 97.6, that is a better indicator of thyroid function, excuse me, than a thyroid panel, a blood panel. So that's something to really keep in mind. You know, that's a better way to do it.
Yeah, because sometimes people seem to be having symptoms of low thyroid hormone, and they get a blood test for it and everything, and they're told there's nothing wrong.
That's right. That's right. So getting back to exercise, one of the beautiful aspects of exercise is it's detoxifying. So if we can keep exercising, my father passed away at 92, was a chronic exerciser. He would do yoga in the morning. He would ride his bike. He had a Schwinn bike, an exercise bike. He would do a half an hour a day till he was 91. And he would, when we finally sold his bike, it had over 50,000 miles on it.
Wow.
And that was the Schwinn, wasn't something that he could take outside. It was just in the house.
Oh, one of those indoor exercise bikes.
But he was a chronic exerciser. And he had graduated from Springfield, Massachusetts College, Springfield College, which is the mecca for phys ed schools. And he never used his phys ed degree except to coach, but he had studied for years learning all the aspects of mind-body balance, and using exercise is a key. So I would suggest to anybody that may have never even got into exercise, you can start at any time. You got to work slowly up. As an exercise physiologist, which was originally my background, we learned that people that had, I got a master's at the University of Pittsburgh with concentration there in exercise physiology, because that's what they do there. And they had us working with cardiac patients, where we would be testing them to see how after a cardiac event they could build what we call collateral circulation. You're actually around the dead area of the heart building circulation networks that grow out from the dead area to allow the heart to pump better, so that the dead area doesn't have to be dead. You've got what we call these networks of veins and arteries and everything else that are building through the heart.
Yeah, I never heard that before. This dead area thing that you're talking about, that's part of the heart?
The exercise increases, that's why they put them on a really good exercise program, because it actually rebuilds the network of circulation around the area that's dead in the heart that no longer can get the circulation through it. So by putting them on an exercise program, and I actually wrote my master's thesis on exercise for the cardiac patient, and I remember at the time my advisor they kind of moved us in areas they wanted us to do a master's thesis, and he said, I'd like you to do an update for all of us in the physiology lab. So they pick somebody every year to kind of do the most update research, and he kind of laughed at me and he said, okay, tell me something I don't already know. And so I spent literally 3 months in the physiology labs, and also working in the medical library looking up cardiac rehabilitation, and that is so major. And many of these people at the time were swimming, and to get their heart and circulation improved, to get this collateral circulation moving and building in the heart. And it's just an amazing thing that when you exercise anywhere in the body where circulation is limited, you're getting better circulation. You're getting rid of the plaque. You're oxygenating the tissues. It's a wonderful thing to do. So everybody should exercise, and they recommend no less than 30 minutes a day, preferably an hour a day. Even if it's just going out for a power walk or swimming or doing something, cleaning the house for an hour.
Cleaning the house actually helps?
It actually gets the heart rate up. It's moving the circulation. As we move the circulation, we get oxygen to the cells. And a lot of times, like in my office, one of the first things I do besides test blood pressure is put an oxygen. We check the O2 levels, with a little thing we put on your index finger. And that tells me how much oxygen you're carrying in your blood. So if someone, for example, has a lung issue, it's going to show up with lower oxygen.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Levels in the body.
Definitely.
But that's the key. We want to get circulation moving, and we want to get oxygenation to the body cells. As we get it into the cells, the blood is carrying more hemoglobin, which is more oxygenated blood. So that's the whole idea of exercising and making sure that the body is getting oxygenated.
Right. I know that when the person who's had a stroke, when they get exercise, apparently when they had the stroke, a certain section of veins and things in the brain die. But by having the patient do their exercises, it's my understanding that they grow more
Exactly.
new veins to replace the ones that died.
Exactly. And that again is what we're talking about, collateral circulation. So there's actually, say you have a dead spot in the brain or in the heart or wherever, and you start exercising, and we get you on an exercise program that's really making you huff and puff, gradually moving up. I mean, water exercise to me is one of the best places to start.
Exercising in the water.
Oh, absolutely, because your weightlessness, you're like 30% of your regular body weight when you're in the water, and as a consequence of that, you can go in having maybe had a massive heart attack and can't really get huffing and puffing too much. In the water, however, you can work out a lot longer and a lot more strenuously, just keeping your arms and legs moving. And now you're building muscle, you're working, even though you're not building muscle like you would if you were working weights, you're able to get circulation to the muscles, circulation to the brain, circulation to the heart, which activates this collateral blood venous circulation and building the network, like I said, that we can now get the circulation through circumventing the area that may be dead either in the brain or in the heart. And yoga is a very good exercise format that can also be used to increase circulation, chi, prana, whatever you want to call it, to various areas of the body through stretching exercises, opening up channels, which they call nadi, N-A-D-I, in the yogi system. And in the Tai Chi and the Qigong, we call it chi, the meridians open up, and that fires vital life force essentially to these areas that need help. And you can actually break a sweat doing Tai Chi.
Oh, yeah.
And yoga. I mean, you really can. They have hot yoga where they'll get actually in a room that's very humid and hot, and they'll do the stretches, and some people like it, some people don't.
Yeah, I'm one of the ones, if it's too hot in a room where I'm trying to practice yoga, it's like I give up at the end of 10 minutes instead of maybe practicing for a whole hour. So warm, cold, I don't care to do yoga where it's cold either. Just a nice, comfortable temperature works best for me.
It's best to always warm up before you do any activity, and the reason for that is the muscles, think in terms of the muscles and the ligaments like rubber bands. You wouldn't take a rubber band out and start stretching it say it was in the refrigerator, and you took that rubber band out and you went like this, it's going to snap.
Break. Yeah.
And that's the reason why we really need to do warm-up exercises, to warm the muscles and the ligaments up first. And as we do that, then we begin to slowly get the circulation moving through the organs and glands, through the muscles, through the joints. And that's usually when you get you're in a safety zone to start exercising a little bit more directly. If you don't warm up, and we've all done this, you start into an activity, that's when you can get an injury.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to prevent, that's why in any class they always have what they call warm-up exercises before they get into a sport. So when we would have gym classes, we'd always have warm-up.
And then they talk about cool down exercises where you gradually slow down at the end of the exercise session. That's supposed to prevent things too.
Absolutely. That gets the blood pressure back to a normal range. In other words, if you've been exercising at a fast pace, you don't just stop dead. I remember when I was I think it was a freshman at Edinburgh University in the phys ed department, and I remember we were in our track course where we were learning track and field, and we were doing sprints, and we were not only doing sprints and being timed, but they were having us jump over the and I want to tell you what, you had to be speeding like mad, and then you jump up over the little things.
Was it called a horse?
No,
there was some
that's
sort of
gymnastics.
Oh, gymnastics.
But anyway, I remember when we were doing the sprints and we were doing the jumps over the hurdles, they call them. she said, don't stop cold. You keep moving after you've done the hurdles, or you keep moving after you've sprinted, because you've got your blood pressure up. And if you stop, your blood pressure will just drop way down like that, and you can pass out.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was just going to say was I've heard that you can actually faint.
Yes.
If you don't go through the cool down process.
The cool down is so important. So warm up and cool down. And cool down, sometimes after you've done a sprint, you'll see on the Olympics or whatever, they'll just slow down, they'll keep their arms and legs moving, but they'll go to a fast walk. Or they'll, you don't see them just stop dead and put their head down, because that's when you will pass out.
Oh, gosh. That would be a pretty weird experience.
Yes.
To just stop exercising and then,
Dead stop,
and then
yeah.
pass out. So
Exactly.
Well, one of the questions I was going to ask you was why it is important to be involved in an exercise program throughout our entire lifetimes, but you've already said a whole bunch of things about that. Is there any other things that you might want to mention?
Longevity. If you look at general longevity, most people that exercise live longer. That's based on the studies. In addition, we know mind-body can't be separated. When you're an exerciser, your chi flow, your prana, your deep breathing, all that activates the vital life force. So you're going to be healthier longer. Now you have to also be careful you don't get injured, because if you're doing anything real active in your 80s and 90s, my cousin that I was just mentioning, that was a tennis player in her 80s, has had some problems as she's gotten older. She's snapped an ankle. So I generally recommend, if someone were to ask me, do you think it's better to stay vigorously active as you get older? My suggestion would be no. Go to more of the lifetime sports. Now, if you have been exceedingly active and you feel like you can continue on, be prudent about it, but don't go into anything that, like, don't start into a jogging routine in your 80s or your 70s. Go into something milder, swimming, tai chi, yoga, even badminton, as long as you're not doing something. Now, badminton, believe it or not, gets the cardiac moving up fast. You burn a lot of calories with badminton, and it also gets the heart rate up fast. And that was one of the exercises they would get these cardiac patients on eventually. In other words, they'd start them out at a lower level and then move them up to higher levels of activity, even to the point they were playing badminton, which is really active. Badminton is a great sport, but again, you have to be careful, because you can trip, you can fall.
Right.
So, but it is considered a lifetime sport. But like, for example, basketball, volleyball, those activities when you're younger, they're kind of lifetime. Volleyball can kind of be a lifetime sport. But again, if you're getting into real competitive volleyball, as you get older, that can become more stressful.
Right.
For the body and the joints.
And the people's bones break more easily when they get older, too.
They're more brittle.
Now, another thing that you always hear, I don't know if you agree with it or not, but you always hear, well, if you, like, say, buy a DVD, an exercise DVD, they always have these things printed on the screen at the beginning before they start showing the exercises about how you should ask your doctor first before you get involved in a particular form of exercise or sport or anything, apparently to make sure that you're in good enough health and at a fitness level where you can do the particular
and the best way to do that. So that's such a good point, Gail. The best way to do that is if you're in any activity, whether, and we forgot to mention, which, and we should, cycling is a lifetime sport.
Oh, yeah.
You know, getting on a bike. And I have another cousin. I have a lot of cousins that are pretty active. I have another cousin that is a mountain biker. He's now 63. And I was just talking to him on the phone the other day, and I said, are you still mountain biking? He goes right up a cliff. And he would work with a gal that actually taught mountain biking. I have his sister, who's also a cousin, who goes on hiking expeditions, takes people into the mountains, down into the gorges of, you know, Yellowstone Park and in the mountains of Colorado. I mean, she's all over the place. She has 2 daughters that are hikers that have hiked the Pacific Trail. Now, these are lifetime sports, but you don't just go out and do it. You have you have to get acclimatized sometimes to the atmosphere that you're working in, whether you're a hiker or whatever. But yes, if you can exercise and talk at the same time, that's fine. But if you're out of breath as you're exercising, you have to be prudent and say, okay, I need to be able to breathe and talk at the same time. And if I can't do that, then I shouldn't be doing this activity until I get exercised to a point where I've trained myself to be able to raise my pulse rate up and be able to do this. And once you do it, it is amazing how much better you feel.
Well, a few weeks ago, I interviewed a man from Westfield who learned how to ride a bicycle when he was about 4 or 5 years old, and as an adult, he found that when he was out bicycling as a young adult with other people, he'd always have to keep stopping and waiting for the other people to catch up to him. And so he wound up actually, somebody suggested he should actually get into bicycle racing because he was so fast. And well, anyway, I interviewed him. He actually wound up practicing with the Olympical bicycle racing team, and he's pretty interesting. When he was 29 years old, he and a friend rode their bicycles all the way from San Diego, California, across the southern states to Florida, and then up along the East Coast to New York State. And then he rode all the way back after from where he started out at, you know, but I guess they had a lot of adventures along the way.
Oh, and cycling is a wonderful lifetime sport, and if you're good at it, but there's different types of cycling. There's on-the-road cycling, which, of course, you have to be careful of the cars.
Well, he's 67 years old now, so I don't imagine he'll be doing any more cross-country trips, but he seems to be in pretty good shape for
for
and
there's
age,
people
you know.
a lot older than 67 that are in their 80s that are cycling.
Right.
But again, you have to understand that if you're doing road cycling, there is the problem with cars.
Right.
If you do off-road cycling, that's more like the tires have a different tread.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, there's a road tire that is smooth. And then there's a tire that you can use, like if you want to ride through fields.
Oh.
That can be kind of a cross between a road tire and a mountain bike tire. But the mountain bike treads are real, you know, ribbed. So they can go right up the side of a cliff.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and they can bounce, you know, with their bikes and everything else. And I remember this one cousin of mine that is a mountain biker. He wanted me to go with him on a bike ride, and I owned a health club at the time, so I was doing a lot of exercise. I was doing at least 2 to 3 aerobic classes a day, so I was in great shape. I'm going to tell you. I said, whatever we do, Mike, let's not go straight up a hill. Well, he went up a hill that was more like this, but I'll tell you what, is great a physical conditioning that I was in at the time. I had to get off the bike and pull it up.
Push it up.
And it was because he was used to this going straight up, and he was just boom, 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 and I was really having to push to get it up to the top of the hill. And when I got up, I thought, wow, This
Yeah.
is so there are different levels
Uh-huh.
of cardiovascular health, because here I am in really good cardiovascular shape, but I had to get off the bike because I couldn't go straight up.
Well, apparently, it all depends on how experienced you are at the certain sport.
Exactly. And again, if you can talk and your face isn't red and you're not breathing hard, that means you're fine. But if you start to feel like you're getting overheated, you can't breathe, and you're running out of breath, you're gasping, that is definitely a time to slow down. And again, not just stop, but slow down. And I had another incident that I remember. One cousin that's also very active lived on a mountain. And we went mountain climbing. And we were doing a switchback, which meant we were going like this, so we weren't going straight up.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember thinking, she was talking the entire time up that switchback. And I kept thinking, how can she do this? Well, it was because she was doing mountain climbing every day.
Right.
You know, she was on a mountain.
Exactly.
And I did it, but I wasn't talking the whole time.
her body was used to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you know, we went on a Saturday night one time, and this was back when I was still taking care of my mother. My brother would take care of her on the weekends when he was off from his full-time job, and then I'd take care of her all week. I'd go back after supper on Sunday nights. But this one Saturday night, a cousin of my husband's called and invited, said he and his wife were going to go for a hike in the gorge the next day. And they wanted us to come with them. Well, this is kind of a funny story. It had been a really rainy summer. I mean, it was a really nice day. It was like the last Sunday in September of that year. And it was a really beautiful day. It got up to around 70 degrees, and the sun was shining, and it wasn't humid or anything. And, you know, so we went with them, but it had been rainy all during the summer months, and somehow that had made it more slippery down in the gorge than normal. I mean, this is the Chautauqua Gorge here in Chautauqua County, and honestly, it was about all we could do. The hike, we were supposed to hike from the end of Hannum Road to the end of Bloomer Road, and it was, my husband said it would take us 3 hours. Well, it was so slippery, that shale was like glare ice. We were struggling to keep from falling down. We didn't want to break any bones or anything. We were all in our 60s by then, you know. And eventually, I actually did fall down, and as I was falling, I thought, oh gosh, now I'm going to break a bone. How am I going to take care of my mother, you know, all this, and oh my gosh. But then I didn't break anything, so I must still have pretty strong bones, but I fell down, and I actually didn't get injured except for some bruises. But I remember the hike wound up taking us 6 hours.
Oh, my.
What was supposed to have been a 3-hour hike took 6. Well, we didn't really have enough food with us. We had enough water with us, but we didn't really have enough food with us. And I was so hungry by the time and then after we were all worn out from struggling to not fall down and get hurt, we had to climb up. Well, you know, it was like soft ground. It wasn't like hard or anything where we finally came up out of the gorge, but then but it was like a hill. It was about that steep, and we had to pull after we were all tired out from
falling
from the struggle of getting from one place to another. Then we had to pull ourselves up out of the gorge by grabbing onto, you know, like trees and limbs tree limbs and stuff, you know. The next day, and then I was all worn out, and then I had to go back in and take care of my mother all night after I was all worn out from the hike. And And I'll tell you, for some reason, the next day I was hungry all day. It was like I couldn't get enough to eat, you know.
Exactly.
A friend of mine, when I was telling her about it, she goes, "Oh, that must have used up a lot of your energy."
And I'm sure it did. Another thing that I want to mention, I did research, and actually it's a one-of-a-kind research on rebounding on a mini trampoline. And I got written up in the Philadelphia Inquirer that went out on syndication and played in the Miami Herald also. And essentially what it was about is rebounding on a mini trampoline is what the astronauts do before they go into outer space.
Oh, they do? I didn't know that.
Yeah, because they lose muscle mass and bone mass when they're in outer space because there's no gravitational pull. So when you bounce on a mini trampoline, or the outdoor trampolines they have in the yards, you're getting 2 G's of gravitational pull on every cell of your body, all your muscles, all your joints. And as a consequence of this, it's actually better than lifting weights.
Oh, is it really?
And you don't have to bounce real high. You can do what we call a health bounce, where your feet are just barely leaving the mat and still getting tremendous benefit. So my suggestion is for anybody that may be just wanting to start an exercise program and work up, get a mat that's stiff. Don't get one that's real bouncy.
Okay.
And start doing the health bounce where your feet barely leave the mat. Put it in front of the TV and watch TV for a half an hour and just lightly bounce. Now you're building the muscles of your legs, every muscle in your body. You're gaining muscle weight. As you gain muscle weight, you burn more calories at rest. It raises your basal metabolic rate. And it's safe. You can get them with the bar that goes across. So if someone were to ask me what's the best exercise known to mankind, it's definitely rebounding. You're improving lymphatic circulation, so you're detoxing at the cellular level, cleaning the lymph. You're getting circulation of the blood in a much better way to organs and glands. You can do faster bouncing to, get your heart rate up. And the big thing, like I said, is building muscle. And you don't have to lift heavy weights or do anything like that. And put it in front of your TV. So your time goes quickly watching a movie.
Well, you made me think of something. One of the things that I do for exercise is Middle Eastern belly dance.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And one of the moves is called heel taps, where you lift, where you just keep lifting the heels up and down.
Yes.
Of the feet. And, well, I mean, for a choreography, you might just do 1 or 2 heel taps at a certain point. But if you get belly dance videos that, are like cardiovascular and like that are just sort of instructional ones that you can exercise with just for help, they'll do the heel taps for a few minutes straight.
And that's bouncing.
And the particular video that I learned that from, the instructors called it the bouncing shimmy. So, and shimmies are real good too. They increase circulation to the entire body.
And we should bring up also something that is another lifetime sport, is dancing.
Dancing, yes.
That's something you can do your entire life. And I know I've seen them
and there's different types of dance, so you can dance at whatever level of fitness you're at,
And what's intriguing is you'll see a lot of times on Facebook, and I just had to howl, they'll show this woman come out on a dance floor with a walker. And she's barely moving, and she's got this like little outfit on, and you're thinking to yourself, what's going on here?
This was an elderly lady?
An elderly lady. And she moves her walker out onto the floor, and there's a man there standing, waiting for her, that's younger. And all of a sudden, she pushes the walker to the side. She takes this cape off, and she starts into a dance step like you wouldn't believe. And he's swinging her and she's going underneath his legs, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my,
Well, this is apparently people who'd been practicing
Exactly.
together, you know.
Exactly. And they've been,
Yeah.
and she has been dancing since she was a young girl.
And this
Or-
was somebody like in her 80s or
Oh,
something?
90s.
90s. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time she needs a walker to get
Well,
her
no,
up?
that they were just trying to kind of fool you.
Oh, I see. It was a
She
joke.
comes out onto the floor with a walker, and she's not moving real fast. And then all of a sudden, she's just ba-boom, and he's swinging her. And she has this cape, and she throws the cape off. So you're thinking she's just like this little old woman with a cape over her shoulders using a walker. The reality of it is she's into dance mode in 5 minutes and doing things that most people 20 and 30 years younger
Right.
couldn't do.
Or even younger than that.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I mean, a lot of young people
True.
would need a lot of practice to be able to do something like that.
Exactly, exactly. And the unique thing about it is, these are people that have been lifetime exercisers. So they are always the one, like my uncle that was still playing tennis at 88, my dad still exercising, doing his bike for half an hour every day, ends up with 50,000 miles on the bike. I mean, imagine that, just in your house. And he would do yoga and stretching, and warm himself up. So, yeah, I mean, these are really important things to remember. If you want to live to be old, that's a great way to start.
Well, I don't use them myself, and I don't know if it should really be necessary or not. But now there's these things that people can buy that they can wear that keeps track of how many steps they've
Right.
walked and everything. Like I said, I don't know that I think of it as a necessity myself. But
I think the big thing that we, as physiologists and people that are in the health field, do understand, though, is while exercise is good, and we should exercise every day, some of these people that go way over the top, that isn't good, because it actually lowers your immune system when you're trying to push yourself way beyond your limits. So it's one thing if you're used to it, but as you age, you're going to have to start backing down and not doing the the amount of exercise.
so you do think that once you reach a certain point in your life that maybe it is a good idea to wear those things?
Well, excuse me, only if you see you're beginning to slow down. You should listen to your body. But you see people that are pushing themselves, they call it hitting the wall.
Oh.
Where you're older, you've been exercising maybe many years, and you keep thinking, well, I'm immortal, I can keep doing this. No, you can't. And people that overdo exercise are actually running their immune system down. So these people that are runners, that are trying to, or bikers, or combination of runners and bikers that are trying to do this way excessive exercise,
Well,
that's not healthy.
There was somebody that I knew.
Moderation.
There was somebody that I knew that always did a lot of running. When he wasn't at work, it seemed like he was out running or something. And you'd see him run. He'd run all the way from Mayville to Westfield and back, and
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And he was always doing it. And and then when he was 53 years old, he just died unexpectedly from a heart attack. This was somebody who'd been into martial arts and stuff like that too. But then, and everybody thought it was pretty odd, so then you start having these people thinking, well, it doesn't matter what you eat and all that kind of stuff. Something can still happen anyway. But then I was reading, I guess it was last year, a book by Dr. Michael Greger called How Not to Die. Have you heard of it?
No.
And Dr. Greger said that people who are into long-distance running, they cause themselves to have, what was it that he called it? Oxidative stress.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm speaking about.
Oxidative stress is what he said.
In other words, the old adage of just because a little bit is good does not mean a lot is better. So you want to be use moderation in all realms of life, moderation in eating, moderation in exercising, and remembering that the exercise, while it's important, overdoing it literally lowers the immune system. And And that's not what we want to achieve.
No, no, it isn't.
In other words, your body has to keep up. And if you're pushing yourself beyond your limits, then your immune system begins to be stressed. So while it's good to stress the body to a certain extent, exercising and working our heart rate up, overdoing it actually begins to put stress on the heart. And then we want to go to the idea of, look at the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Orientals as a group, and the East Indians. What do? They exercise, but it's yoga, it's Tai Chi,
Yeah.
it's moderation,
Yeah.
and they get the same cardiovascular benefits doing that as we do with this heavy-duty running and
Right.
biking and all this kind of stuff. So you don't have to beat yourself
Well,
up to
you
do
know,
this.
it's my understanding, because I practiced both, and I think Tai Chi and Qigong, which I don't do as much of, are probably similar too, but it's my understanding that both belly dance and yoga, to begin with, belly dance is just as good for you as yoga is.
Oh, yes, it is.
But both of those kinds of exercise count as every kind of exercise you need. Both of those, both the
Right.
belly dance and the yoga count as your weightlifting exercise, your cardio, and your stretching, all three of those.
Well, and the neat thing about belly dancing is in the Chinese and the East Indian systems, they call it the Hara region,
Right,
H-A-R-A, right below the belly button. And when you're doing belly dancing, you're focusing on that area. And that's tremendously enabling the vital life force to increase.
Right, right. I guess it helps to prevent a lot of symptoms that a lot of women experience too, like menstrual cramps, and
Yes.
and it makes childbirth more easy and so forth.
Absolutely.
So
Again, the goal is moderation at all realms. And you're absolutely right. People that are starting to age, that are doing these are starting to try to overdo it as they age. They're not, settling back a little bit. Your heart needs a rest. You don't have to keep pushing yourself beyond your limits. Bottom line.
I know a guy named Terry Beck from Dunkirk. Part of what he does is he teaches Tai Chi. And I remember him referring to exercise that's good for you. He said something about less is more.
Yes, yes. And
So-
that's exactly what I'm saying, that you don't need to go out and pound the pavement. Remember, when you're pounding the pavement, even if you're wearing good shoes, running, jogging, cycling,
It's hard
whatever,
on your joints.
It's hard on your joints. And at some point in time, your joints are going to start having problems.
Right, right.
I know golfers that are friends of mine that golf 27 holes a day. That's eventually going to catch up with you. Or playing too much tennis. That stopping and turning is hard on your hips and your knees and your shoulders. So again, as we age, we have to kind of start saying, okay, maybe we ought to start doing more water exercise, more rebounding on a mini trampoline, maybe gentle walking with some weights. But we have to be prudent.
Well, you
That
know,
word prudent is important.
I know you keep your stamina longer if you're walking instead of running. I mean, you get out of breath right away when you're running or jogging, but yeah, as far as walking goes, you go for walks on bare ground, like hiking in the woods. You can walk all day and not feel tired afterwards.
And it's like swimming and taking water exercise or swimming in laps. You can do that forever.
Right,
You know, that's
right.
not something because of being weightless in the water and being able to do more things. And you know, what's real interesting is when you see people who get knee replacements, hip replacements, what's the first thing the physical therapist recommends? Warm water exercise. If you're in a warm water element, you get better circulation. Now, you don't want to get in a cold water pool.
No.
But warm water exercise or even salt water
Oh, salt water?
is very good for you. It's very good for the joints. And some people that have their own swimming pools are now putting
salt
water
in their
Yep,
in their swimming pools. Well, that's interesting.
It's healing. Have you ever heard of the, I think it's Tel Aviv, where the, I'm trying to think of it's one of the seas there that is all salt. And they get...
It's not one of the oceans.
it's
It's one of the smaller...
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I can't, it's
Is
where
it-
the Dead Sea salts are.
maybe that's it, the Dead Sea.
I think it is the Dead
Yeah,
Sea.
yeah.
And
That's right.
they get in there and they just float, and if they have joint problems, they come out and their joints feel good. And that's why a lot of people go there. In fact, it's become so popular that the surrounding areas that are not on the Dead Sea have actually gone in and made huge openings in their ground and taken the Dead Sea water.
Really?
And they're now using, like lakes where they can go and soak in the Dead Sea salt water.
Well, we're down to 2 minutes here. Okay, let's see. Oh, yeah, what advice would you give to people on how to choose a sport they would enjoy?
And that's a biggie. You want to do something you like. So if you have a spouse that likes to do golf and you're not a golfer, and you're not interested in golf and you don't think you'd ever be, don't do it. If you always pick a sport or an activity, a lifetime activity that you really like. Don't go into something just because your spouse or your significant other likes to do that and you don't like to do it. Pick something you know you're going to enjoy and you're going to keep up with. Because if you start something
And you don't enjoy it,
and you go out and buy clubs, because I'll be honest with you, a lot of people get very stressed with golf because you have to have some really good skills and you have to be playing it for many years to get good at it. So if you start late in life and you're not very good at it, probably is best to find another sport.
And there's all kinds of exercises available today, and teachers
my,
and things more than there used to be, so it isn't really hard to find somebody who can teach you.
Very good point.
Who
There's
can
so
teach
many
you
different activities,
something.
bowling and golf and tennis, and now they're doing pickleball. So people that used to play tennis and they can't do it anymore, they get smaller rackets, they use just the service court, and a lot of fitness centers now have pickleball courts. Or they take a gymnasium and map it off and have pickleball.
Yes, well, we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives. Thanks for coming on again, and we'll have to think of some other reason you can come on.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay, you're welcome, and thank you.